Hey everyone, welcome back as always. Today we're looking at a newish resin from our opinion, the king of castables, Bluecast. So if you're familiar with Bluecast X1 resin, then you'll know how good it is, and if not, go watch the review that we did quite some time ago at the link in the description below. If you're new to the market and you're looking for a new resin, that is certainly a good one to try. So you might be wondering, why am I hyping up X1 so much when that's not even the subject of this video? Simply because as good as that is for jewelry, there are some specific types that it cannot do well. And that style, namely, is Filigree. It seems to be one of those most popular things in the Middle East and parts of Asia, where designs are, they're not really traditional filigree, which is hand fabricated using twisted little wires and building up these airy kind of Gothic-like designs. Maybe it's more appropriate to say neo-filigree in this case, because these designs are just so exceptionally thin, they're more reminiscent of. So Bluecast X1 prints rather soft. It wouldn't be proper to say that it's a foam or a sponge, but it's very light and it's flexible and it kind of feels foamy. Simply put, this isn't really the ideal characteristic that you're looking for when you're printing something ultra thin. So the chemists at Bluecast created, as I understand it, a variant of X1 with more hardener, bringing the overall feeling of the print closer to something more like a typical plastic 3D print. Personally, I think this was a really good move on the part of Bluecast, because as they've experimented with in the past with additives, on their older resin X10, for example, they had 3 different types of additive that you could add to it. It was like a little bottle that you just poured in. You could make it harder, softer, or sharper in terms of detail. And that worked okay at the time. However, I feel like a lot of people personally prefer a product that they can just buy and use. It's ready to go. There's no questions or, why didn't it work for me type things going on. I may be wrong, so please correct me if you preferred the additive way, but I feel like the market kind of has proven that I might be a bit more correct. So let's go back to XFilagree. If you follow along with this channel, then this wouldn't be the first time that you've actually seen the Bluecast XFilagree, as we did showcase it in our most recent video with Frozen, featuring the Sonic Mini 8K. In that video, we were just looking at the performance of the printer, which, spoiler alert, it handles extremely well. XFiligree was able to easily handle printing on all of our machines, the Prusa SL1S, Mars 3, and of course the Frozen Sonic Mini 8K. And it actually prints so well, in fact, that we were able to zoom in with our new albeit cheap, macro microscope camera that we're able to see the individual pixels. The Prusa SL1S is currently equipped with a 2K panel with an XY pixel size of about 49 microns, whereas the Mars 3 has a 4K panel and has an XY pixel size of about 35 microns. And of course, as the name implies, with the Sonic Mini 8K, an 8K panel with an XY pixel size of 22 microns. It's pretty incredible that we're able to see this at all, and it shows that the resin is exceptionally high quality, and the resin exposure profiles are very well dialed in. Those settings, by the way, were all taken directly from Bluecast's official support page with virtually no variation, so we didn't change anything. This is just one of those huge reasons why I consider Bluecast to be one of those top castable resin companies, because you can hit the ground running with their materials on virtually any machine. Now, of course, they wouldn't be the king of printing and casting if the most important thing wasn't very good, and that, of course, is the casting results. But before we do, I want to make something very clear about filigree casting in particular. It is very hard, and Bluecast knows this and agrees. I have actually spoken with them via email before doing this because I knew going into it that it was going to be difficult. I asked them for some advice about flask temperatures, metal temps, and there's really no easy way to make this happen. And they actually have high-end casting equipment and low-end casting equipment. We have the low-end casting equipment because the high-end stuff is just like astronomically expensive. They agreed that using this type of equipment, which we, and I think many of you guys do as well, is just not ideal for casting filigree stuff. So if you're not familiar with casting, then let me lay this out for you here and now, because these aren't really excuses. These are physical limitations that in some case can't be overcome depending on your setup. Molten metal is immediately cooling once it leaves the source of heat. be that an induction melter, an electric furnace, or a torch. Quickly the metal flows when it actually leaves that heat source into the mold itself is incredibly important. You may think that the solution is to simply increase the temperature, but you'd be wrong. In most cases, precious metals are alloys, meaning that they're created with an amalgamation of metals, a whole bunch of different things. And overheating them can create casting problems unto themselves. The temperature of the flask that you're pouring the metal into can help the metal stay molten for longer. However, much like the metal temperature, there isn't a whole lot of wiggle room when it comes to that either. The general rule is to have the flask temperature approximately 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the metal temperature. Again, there are exceptions, but most gypsum bonded investments can't exceed a maximum temperature of 1,350 anyway. There are some exceptions though. Some can go a little bit higher, but ultimately at about that magic number, they start to break down and you get cracking. Another big limitation that you'll face when you start to use a higher flask temp is that the vacuuming becomes more difficult, because the silicone seals that are around the flask to create that vacuum start to break down at about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, producing a horrible smell. They just literally burn and break apart. There are quite a few different styles and products that you can buy to protect those silicone seals and get more life out of them, but that's an entirely separate video. If you want to hear more about that, leave a comment down below. So having laid out some of these things for you now, there's a lot to consider when it comes to casting, and it only gets more difficult when you're trying to cast filigree. Even if I do increase my flask and metal temperature, the results are not guaranteed with a setup like ours and probably most of yours watching this. The best way to ensure high quality, good, consistent results is with high-end specialty casting equipment called overpressure machines. These machines are the melter, the vacuum, and in some cases, some other things as well, all in one package. They use compressed shielding gas in the melting chamber around the metal in place of a flux, like boric acid or borax or something. This pressure can shoot the metal down into the flask underneath it with as much as 90 psi or 3 bar of pressure. The flask is also under vacuum, considerably higher vacuum pressure than what we can achieve as well. So the metal is basically shot down straight into the flask while simultaneously pulled at high speed from all directions, giving you an extremely dense and full casting. Bluecast openly says that they use a Galani G3 Ultimate machine, which are made in Italy, as Bluecast is stationed in Italy as well. It makes sense. If you're familiar with other YouTube channels like Pablo, he's a dealer for Yasui, which is very similar to Galani, but they're made in Japan. Large companies like Pandora use Indatherm VC machines, which are made in Germany, and there are a few others worth checking out as well if you're looking more into that topic. Bringing it back though, because we've kind of gone off on a tangent. Bringing it back, once again, filigree casting is very difficult, and we are not equipped to achieve these consistent results. We attempted to increase all of our temps and use metals that we know and trust and we could get a really good flow out of. We used R&R Plasticast as well as Bluecast X, which will be a separate video, by the way. We're going to talk more about that in the future. Get subscribed again if you're not already. And these are the results that we got pretty consistently, incomplete fills. I know that these are temperature related because of the way that the ends are shaped. They're rounded over. This is an indication to me that the metal was trying to flow there, but it cooled too quickly. In other words, it wasn't able to be pulled by the vacuum in quick enough. There wasn't enough pressure on top. So it doesn't really matter. It could be temperature related. In either case, the metal didn't get to where it needed to be in the short amount of time that it was molten. Now, we predicted these filigree casting issues before we even received the resin, before we even started printing. So we made sure to print some other types of models as well, something more typical for a Western market, and of course the stuff that we pretty much try out on all of our resins. So we're not at a total loss for casting results. This resin also prints more typical jewelry models extremely well, and it casts them flawlessly as well. So we had no problems whatsoever looking at the really heavy signet ring, which actually does tend to be a problem with some resins. Sometimes the thermal expansion is a bit too much on heavy stuff, and the resin just, or rather the investment, I suppose, can't handle it. All of the micro stone settings, as we would expect with filigree being in the name, turned out great. tiny little hinges that I've printed, all the surface detail on the skull. The only thing that didn't turn out, of course, as I mentioned, was the filigree on top. So based off of these results, I would rank XFiligree very highly, pretty much tied with X1. It's almost a king. Whether you're printing normal jewelry or filigree, this resin should be able to easily handle high quality prints regardless of your printer, with exceptionally good castings in virtually any metal. Just remember what I said in the rest of the video, that filigree is a very big challenge and you need to be properly equipped for it beyond your printer and your resin choice. I would even be hesitant to send it out to a casting house, make sure that they are equipped, because they might just be using something like what we are. So I hope that you found this informative. Even though we didn't get the best possible result, I actually take some pride in our choice of equipment because it's attainable to virtually anyone willing and able to invest in bringing casting to your studio. If we had a G3 Ultimate or a Yasui K2 or an Indotherm VC 450, then all of our videos would pretty much end exactly the same. The castings were great. And no wonder, because these machines cost about $25,000, $50,000. They're specifically designed for casting. And of course, none of you out there would be able to replicate this pretty much ever. So yeah, someday we hope to grow to the point where we can justify getting one of those machines. And when we do, if we do, we'd love to take you along for the ride and show you what those machines are capable of. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.